Let me turn that around. There we go. Hey everyone, Papa Bear here. I'm going to be getting to a session in a minute. I'm going to wait for some of you to pop in and that on this glorious Easter weekend. Because I have a big question for everyone about something that just ended up happening. Let's see who's on live right now. Let's see who's here. Hey, what's up, Ida? So, I have a question. I just went into the Circle K here in Barrie not too long ago, like maybe 15-20 minutes ago. And this guy in a cowboy hat comes waltzing in with a big flippin' knife on his hip. And I mean big. And, you know, like some of you know, I'm a bladesmith by trade. Well, this guy had a knife from my elbow to about my pinky hanging on his hip. And he's waltzing around in the store like no tomorrow, cowboy hat on, cowboy boots, you know, jacket, you know, minding his own business, and I seen the big flippin' knife on his hip. What would you guys do or say if you seen someone walking into a store with a knife, especially when the guy behind the counter, the clerk, or whatever you want to say, ends up seeing it as well, and ends up, you know, you can see him starting to shake. I stuck around, because I had the cub with me, of course. She's off playing right now. You can actually see her. But, what would you guys say or do if someone walked into a store, a convenience store, anywhere, with a big hunting knife on their hip, and especially with it being unsnapped in the sheath? Would you guys say something to the person, or would you just turn your head and walk the other way, especially if, you know, the counter clerk ends up asking you to stick around? Now, I ended up getting a little worried because I had my daughter with me. And like I said, this guy's just walking around, dazed, not paying any attention, right? Same with the guy behind the counter. The guy behind the counter was actually shaking. So I stuck around. Looked at my daughter, asked her if she wanted to get a slushie, Slurpee, whatever you want to call them. So, you know, she goes, and I'm standing on the one side where, you know, the meathead was, you know, walking around, just to get myself in between him and her. And I went off on him. I did. I gave the guy absolute shit for walking around with a big goddamn knife on his hip. Whether it's unsnapped or not, I don't care who you are. Now, I get in trouble, and I have been fined for walking around with a little pocket knife. And when I say little, I mean like yay big. And this guy's walking around, you know, has his knife on his hip and all the rest of it. And like I said, I gave him a proper blast of shit right in the store. And I made a big scene of it. Because there was probably about 5-6 other people in the store at the same time. I still stuck around to make sure that this guy was alright and all the rest of it, you know, the guy behind the counter. And this guy looks at me and says, I can guarantee you it's not illegal for me to, you know, walk around with this knife in my pocket, with this knife, and it'd be nice if you ended up minding your own business and basically, you know, flip off. Well, I ended up telling him, look, you don't go into a store with a big knife like that or anything else. And I was yelling at him. I fully admit, I was yelling at him at the top of my lungs. And yeah, I was a little kind of worried because I didn't know if he was going to do anything or not, because like I said, the knife sheath was unsnapped. So would you say, like, I don't know if I'm, strange. I know I'm strange. There's no way getting around that. But is it me? Am I just, that much of an asshat? Or am I kind of in the right here? Because I even ended up calling the Barrie City Police just for information. I wasn't not ratting on the person or anything else. I wanted to be in an intellectual position to know what's what. Because like I said, I get in trouble from the police for carrying a small pocket knife that I just use as a tool that I use to carve with. Stuff like that. So I end up calling the Barrie City Police here in Ontario. Sorry, pardon me. And lo and behold, I end up getting an officer on the phone. Told them I just had a question. That's it. And it was about this knife. Well, lo and behold, the wonderful laws of Canada, I'd say something, I don't know if I'd make a scene, but I'd say it made me uncomfortable. Well, you see, that's just it. I ended up letting this asshat know, the wannabe cowboy, the wannabe country boy walking around with this, this cowboy hat on and everything else, dressing up the part of Mr. Cowboy, acting like a cowboy with the knife, like, I ended up, saying, to the cops, like, is it not illegal to be walking around with a knife that bloody big? Apparently not. As long as it's in the sheath, it's snapped, and you're not pointing it at anyone. Hey, what's up, bro? Hey, what's up, Dank? It is completely legal, 100% legal, to be walking around with a knife that big on your hip going into a convenience store. But in Canada, you're not allowed to walk around with a gun on your hip. What's the difference? It's out in plain view and all the rest of it. It's 100% legal to carry a big knife on your hip. And that's according to the Barrie City Police. So I asked them, so if I ended up walking around with a big flippin' machete on my hip, with it still snapped, hanging from my belt, if that would be allowed, if that would be okay, especially if I was going into a store or walking around in downtown Barrie about, carrying this big thing. And apparently it's legal. 100%, as long as you're not pulling it out and you're not pointing it at people. It's legal to walk around with a machete on your hip, with a knife on your hip. What kind of bullshit country are we living in where you're allowed to do that, but you can't walk around with a gun on your hip? To me, it's the same thing. If you're going to walk around with a knife, you may as well be walking around with a gun. Who else thinks that? Especially if you're going into a major major city center. I'm a country boy through and through. Born and raised in the country. I can't stand living in the city. But I can't think of anybody where I live that would leave their property with a big freaking knife that big on their hip. How about you guys? Thank you, Big Sexy. I didn't know if you would agree or not. But I couldn't believe it. When I ended up finding that out from the Barrie City Police, that it's okay to walk around with this big goddamn thing on your hip. Don't get me wrong, I'm all about, live and let live, but I mean, Jesus Christ, if you're going to go into a convenience store or anything like that, leave it in the car. I get in trouble for a little pocket knife, like I said, and this guy's walking around with a big blade on his hip. Both are weapons and under control of a legal person. Yeah, exactly. You're right, Big Sexy. I just wanted to come on here and find out if I was in the wrong for saying something, if I was being an asshat, or anything else like that. Because like I said, I ended up getting between this guy and my daughter just in case, he decided he was going to reach for his hip, because if he reached for his hip, that'd be it. It'd be game on. I wouldn't care. But tells you the messed up country we live in at times, I tell you. It's not illegal to walk around with a machete, with a great big knife, or anything like that on your hip. But you can't own an AR-15, M16, AK-47, or anything else. But this asshole can walk around with a big knife on his hip. You tell me in the comments after I end up stopping this whether or not you agree that that is ridiculous. Anyway, that was my question for you guys. And as always, this is Papa Bear saying, take care of each other.